Welcome to today's episode of Jenn and Juice. I'm your host, Jen.
And I'm your co-host, Juice. As always, we're talking about alcohol, and today's focus is alcoholism in college.
This issue is rampant on college campuses across the country, and today we're joined by two college students to give their thoughts on the issue. Please welcome Taylor Obier and Shelby Massey.
We also have Paloma Alatorre, who has done extensive research on alcoholism in college students.
One of the hot-button issues when talking about alcoholism in college is hazing. Shelby, as a member of a social sorority, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I know for me personally, my sorority, we don't tolerate hazing at all. So the alcohol factor in hazing doesn't apply to us. Hazing in general just doesn't apply. While, yes, me and some of my members, we like to go out and enjoy our weekends. We're not out drinking heavily and getting crazy. We just go out to have fun. And we're a social sorority, but we also do fundraising. We do philanthropy. We do all of these things. We're not just out getting drunk all the time like the movie and the media portrays us to be. So while it's an issue, I don't think it's as heavy as people in the media make it out to be.
I'd have to disagree with that. I think that it's definitely a safety and health issue that's going on in college students, and I think the problem is that students don't realize that it's a problem because drinking under pressure can lead to many unfortunate events. I consider the case of Gordy Bailey. He was a freshman at University of Colorado. And he passed away during his pledging process. And the problem, I mean, obviously he passed away, that's a problem. But the fraternity brothers actually tried to blame the death of Gordy on him and just saying, like, he had an alcohol problem, and which he didn't. And so the problem is that the students don't realize that it's a problem. And if this continues, and it's just going to be a problem. People think that it's okay to haze.
Yeah, I know. When I was in college, I was in Greek life. So you'd always hear these phrases throughout Greek life. You know, this is the way we've always done it. And I guess, you know, as you mentioned, that's why they point to, you know, other stuff as in he had a drinking problem himself instead of, oh, we forced it upon him.
I definitely, I can agree with that. Like, I see it's still an issue, yes. But I think one of the things that people don't recognize in the media, too, is that there are a lot of programs implemented in colleges. I mean, there could be a lot more because it's a very heavy issue, yes. But there are programs starting to be implemented, and that's helpful. So while they're not set in stone, they are happening. But like I said, I can agree that it's still a problem some places. I just know from my experience it's not as heavy a problem for me personally in my sorority or for my sorority sisters in general.
Taylor, you've done research on college alcoholism in media. What are your thoughts?
Well, according to the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, about half of all college students that drink on a regular basis binge drink. And I think that says a lot about the culture in college. It's not just like most individuals go get a casual drink. We binge drink. I mean, I'm a college student myself, and I'm very aware of that. And I think that's because it's so embedded into our culture as college students that's where we don't see it as a problem. That institute also said that about 150,000 per year of the students that do that heavy drinking, they develop an alcohol-related health problem. I don't think when we're binge drinking and when we're having a good time, etc., that we realize that we're really destroying our bodies because it's very poisonous and harmful to us.
Yeah, studies say also that 40% of the students have 5 to 9 drinks, 25% have 11 to 15, and 20% have 15 or more, which is when it starts to become a problem. And like Taylor said, people don't realize that it is a problem. So.
And that's regardless of being in a sorority or any type of organization that kind of promotes that drinking.
After the break, we're going to talk more about media portrayals of alcohol in college and how gender roles play a part.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Welcome back. Before the break, Taylor had talked a little bit about her expertise. Taylor, can you get into that a little bit more in depth?
Yes, a lot of my research came from the TV show Blue Mountain State. which was aired on Spike TV. And I think a lot of us are aware that Spike TV plays a lot of controversial shows like that. It's a show based on American college life, kind of following a football team and kind of that jock culture. It showed a lot a lot of accurate portrayals of what the problems are in college, and one of them being alcoholism. A lot of the show's content is really just them partying and binge drinking constantly. They even have a specific episode called Marathon Monday, where it's an episode about them drinking for 24 hours straight. Even though it is a fictional show, it definitely shows a lot of the aspects of college culture and the binge drinking that does happen.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Marathon Monday, that I guess kind of reflects of traditions around colleges where they day drink and stuff like that, where they just find an excuse to drink all day long, or just wake up and open up a beer or whatever have you that they prefer to drink.
Exactly. That's actually one of the things that happened in that particular episode. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and the character Sammy went to the character Alex's room and said, drink a beer. And he actually said, stop being a pussy, drink a beer, which even plays into the fact that masculinity is kind of a part of drinking. It's kind of more expected and more stereotypical for a man to want to binge drink, even though that puts them at more risk for these health problems associated with that.
Those are some really good points. I also agree that masculinity somewhat plays a role into it. Paloma, what are your thoughts?
I don't think it's necessarily a gender thing, even though the media does portray that. Even in the movie Neighbors, is like all about the fraternity and the guys getting crazy and everything. But I don't think it's necessarily a gender thing. I think it's more of what your body can take, and I mean, usually guys can take more or whatever, but like the definition of binge drinking is when men consume 5 or more drinks and women consume 4 or more drinks. And I think that's just how your body is built. I don't think it's necessarily a gender thing, but the media does portray. Although there will be that movie after Neighbors, and it's actually, I think it'll be interesting to see because I think it's a sorority. So it's like the same thing, but a sorority is doing the same thing. So I think they're trying to avoid the whole masculinity thing. So I think that'll be interesting.
Okay. Early signs of alcoholism can be covered up by college culture. Up next, we'll discuss more about college culture and how it can fuel alcoholism. College culture in the United States can encourage alcoholism, and drinking games are one example of commonly used binge drinking practices. Have any of you experienced this during your college careers?
I have. I know when I go out on the weekends, we play a lot of drinking games. There are several that we play. There's beer pong, there's rage cage, there's flip cup, there's kings, there's a game called Fuck the Dealer, Up the River, Down the River. There are just a lot of games that we play, and they definitely go into the alcoholism part because you are drinking a lot and you don't realize it until like you stand up or you start to move around from one spot and you're like, oh my goodness, I've had a lot more to drink than I realized, because these games constantly have you drinking one after the other, after the other, after the other. And I know myself, I've many times been sitting and found myself gone through like 3 drinks and haven't even realized it because we're just on a going and going and going. So it's definitely an issue. And there was research from CNN, and it's called Nick Nominate game. It was popular back in 2014, and it actually caused 5 deaths. And what you did was you would record yourself drinking, and then you would challenge a friend or someone you knew to drink more than you and videotape it. And it was just this ongoing thing. And it went for a while, and it got really like popular on social media. And it, like I said, it caused 5 deaths. And I know a lot of the times when we're playing drinking games, it's usually to celebrate something like a birthday, or like if someone won a game, if someone won an award. It definitely is, celebrating definitely has to go into a lot into these parties, which lead to these drinking games. So I definitely think it's a celebration of stuff too as well. And
yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. I think in college we want to celebrate so many things, and I think our initial response to that being in the culture that we're in is to have a drink, but I don't think we realize to the extent of how much we're drinking and what it's really doing to us. I had a friend who went to James Madison University, and he had problems with alcohol as well as drugs, and he became clean for about half a year, and then he decided to celebrate becoming sober for that long by having a drink or a night of drinking, and that unfortunately led to his death. I don't think we realize when we're drinking or when we're doing these things what we're doing to ourselves. I think when we're celebrating especially, we're just thinking of having a good time and being with our friends, etc. But we don't see the negative outcomes of it until something like that happens to somebody we're close to.
Going off the celebratory thing, I feel like for a lot of college kids, it's kind of getting out of the house and getting away from your parents' supervision, and that's kind of where it gets out of control.
Yeah. I know I have a lot of friends who had been sheltered most of their lives, and they came to college and they just went wild. And I sat back because I wasn't as active my freshman year as more my sophomore year, where it picked up, and then junior year, like the year I'm in now, it's kind of slowed down as well. But my freshman year, I'd watch all my friends go out and just get heavily intoxicated and come back, and just they'd be sick all night and they'd be sick all day the next day, and it was just like, why would you want to do this to yourself? And then I did it my sophomore year, and I was like, well, now I understand what they're going through, and that's why I calmed down. I didn't want to deal with it. It just makes you feel very uncomfortable, and I haven't had a friend pass away, but I've had several friends who have had to be taken to the hospital because of how much alcohol they've consumed. And it's so scary because then it hits you hard, and you're like, oh my goodness, that could be me, or what if they died because of it? And it's very scary, and it brings you back to reality of the fact that alcohol in college is a very dangerous thing. And it actually, according to Fox News, alcohol can sometimes be a gateway drug, and it can oftentimes be mixed with marijuana, cocaine, and all these harder drugs, and so that does lead to these prevalent issues. And I read somewhere that they're changing the definition of addiction, and now when someone's labeled an alcoholic, that follows them everywhere. It's not just in college. Once you're an alcoholic, you are labeled that for the rest of your life, and that kind of leads to this self-fulfilling prophecy, and these kids are like, well, if I'm labeled that, then I must have to live up to it, and they just go out and they drink all the time, and it causes a lot of harm.
A lot of good points today. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Jenn and Juice, and number one spot for all things alcohol. We'll see you next week.